Which four Boston Bruins greats are on the Locked On Bruins Mount Rushmore? Let's reveal that today.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked Beat. Today is Tuesday, July 16th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine, free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. If you're still searching for a great candidate for your company, you need to check out Indeed. Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your post at Indeed.com/lockedon. Don't search, just match with Indeed. Terms and conditions apply, but if you need to hire, you need Indeed. Today on the podcast, I am talking about the Locked On Boston Bruins Mount Rushmore, the four greats that I'm putting up there with some honorable mentions to boot. Before we get into that, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins, and you can find me, my hockey thoughts, dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. Now, creating a Mount Rushmore of the most important players in Bruins history involves selecting four players who have had significant and lasting impact on the team. And if you look at why Mount Rushmore was created, this, of course, is the sculpture in South Dakota. Part of it is the four presidents were chosen to represent the nation's birth, growth, development, and preservation. So each of these guys that I'm going to name have something to do with those four areas. Not going to go too far back when it comes to the first selection before my time. And here's a look at my selections, the reasons why I believe they deserve a place on this list. First, we're starting with number 4, Bobby Orr. And YouTube listeners can see I've got number 4, Bobby Orr, on my shelf behind me, the kids' book that I've read on the podcast before. And for me, I mean, for everybody, this would be an easy choice. He played for the Bruins from 1966 to 1976, and he revolutionized the role of defenseman. He transformed the role, showcasing an unprecedented blend of speed, skill, and offensive prowess. He redefined what it meant to be a defenseman, becoming an offensive force while still excelling in his defensive duties. And that, of course, when you're looking at Norris trophies, the perfect blend is the guy who is an offensive dynamo or offensive talent at the very least, but also excels in the defensive zone. That's a special, special player. Orr won that trophy as the NHL's best defenseman 8 times. He won the Hart Trophy as the league's most valuable player 3 times. He also won 2 Stanley Cups with the Bruins, 1970 and 1972, which sets him apart from this generation of Bruins that have only won 1 Stanley Cup. Of course, when you're talking about iconic moments, not just in Bruins history, but in NHL history, his diving goal to clinch the 1970 Stanley Cup against the St. Louis Blues remains an iconic image. And again, you can see that behind me, a signed copy of that photo hangs here in my podcast studio. So Bobby Orr, his influence extends beyond his playing years, and he's often cited as one of the greatest hockey players of all time. His number 4 jersey was retired by the Bruins, and he remains a beloved figure in Boston sports. That kind of took a hit when he endorsed the former president, but we don't have to get into that here. Bobby Orr, no question, deserves to be on the Bruins Mount Rushmore. We're going to put another defenseman up there as well. I got to go with Ray Bourque. I grew up watching the 80s, 90s Bruins, and Ray Bourque, who played from 1979 to 2000 with the Bruins, the epitome of consistency and excellence. Spent over 2 decades with the Bruins, setting records, providing steady leadership throughout his tenure. Of course, he was not able to win a Stanley Cup as a member of the Bruins, traded to Colorado where he won there, but he did win the Norris Trophy 5 times, was a perennial all-star, Bruins all-time leader in goals, assists, and points for a defenseman. He served as the Bruins captain for many, many years. And again, he was one of my 2 favorite players growing up for sure. We'll get to the other player here during the honorable mentions. Though he only won his Stanley Cup with the Avalanche, his impact on the Bruins is indelible. It remains to this day. He's around the team. His number 77 jersey was retired by the Bruins, and he, like Orr, remains a revered figure in Boston, and for good reason. Just one of the great Bruins of all time, and it's really sad that he didn't win a cup. Those seasons when the Bruins were so close, but so far, playing against the Edmonton Oilers. They ran up against the Pittsburgh Penguins there in the early 90s. He was as key to that as anybody else. And, still the franchise leader in points with 1,506. He's still the franchise leader in assists with 1,111. He was not the franchise leader in goals. He's been passed by a couple current guys and some former guys, but the franchise leader in points, you cannot not have that guy up there on the list of Bruins greats. Bobby Orr, of course, is not near the top. He had 888 points, but was limited to 631 games. So you look at that point per game average, just pretty insane there. And of course, that iconic goal sets him apart. When it comes to Ray Bourque, though, his leadership, he was captain for 15 seasons. He exemplified leadership, professionalism, a steadying presence on the ice and in the locker room, guiding young players and setting a high standard of performance and conduct. He was really the forebearer for Zdeno Chara and for Patrice Bergeron after him. And then, of course, now currently the captain being Brad Marchand. Unbelievable. And again, his all-time records for goals, assists, and points by a defenseman highlight his offensive contributions, but he also won the Norris Trophy 5 times to speak to his dominance as a defenseman, and played at an elite level throughout his entire tenure with the team. 1,518 games. Just an unreal performer, and again, one of my favorite players growing up. So that's 2 defensemen on Mount Rushmore, Ray Bourque, Bobby Orr. We're going to pivot and talk about a couple forwards here as the podcast continues. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Thank you so much once again for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine, free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. While you're on YouTube, check out Locked On Sports Today, the latest news, analysis, and opinions from across the Locked On universe, free on YouTube and the Amazon Fire TV channels app. All right, so we've already sculpted Bobby Orr and Ray Bourque onto the Locked On Bruins Mount Rushmore. Who's next? Well, we can't not put Phil Esposito up there. He was a Bruin from 1967 to 1975, and he was a goal-scoring machine. His acquisition from the Chicago Blackhawks in 67 marked the beginning of a new era for the Bruins. His physical style of play and nose for the net made him a dominant force in the NHL. He led the league in scoring 5 times, won the Hart Trophy twice. His scoring prowess was unmatched during his prime, and he became the first player to score 100 points in a season for the Bruins, a feat he accomplished 6 times. He, along with Orr, was a key figure in the Bruins' Stanley Cup victories in 1970 and 1972. He had an ability to score in crucial moments and lead the offense, which made him an indispensable member of the team and just so important to the team's success. His impact on the Bruins and the NHL at large was enormous. He had a larger-than-life personality. If he played today, he'd be an instant fan favorite. Combine that with his scoring exploits. He was a fan favorite then. Again, he would be today as well. His number 7 jersey was retired by the Bruins, and he continues to be a revered figure in the hockey community. His contributions to the game extend beyond his playing career, and he went on to have a successful career as a coach and as an executive. Phil Esposito, very worthy of being on the Bruins Mount Rushmore. Again, before my time, but I always lament not being able to see Phil Esposito in action. Just put up some ridiculous numbers for the Bruins, winning 2 cups, 152 points in 1970-71, 133 points in 72, 130 points in 73, 145 points in 74, 127 points in 75, career high of 68 goals. He reached the 60 goal mark 3 times. He had 76 goals one season. We talk about how good David Pastrnak is at the moment. He's not going to touch these records set by Phil Esposito in black and gold. Do we see Pastrnak scoring 77 goals? Do we see him getting to 153 points? I don't know. That's going to be pretty tough to beat, and that's why Phil Esposito belongs on the Mount Rushmore here for the Boston Bruins. Now, the 4th pick, kind of tough. You could go back to the 20s and 30s and look at franchise legends who we'll touch on here in the honorable mentions. You could easily put another defenseman up there like Zdeno Chara. You could put a goalie up there, maybe Tim Thomas for winning in 2011. For me, though, we got to stick with the most recent great, that being Patrice Bergeron. He played from 2003 until just last season, 2023, and he is arguably the best two-way forward of his generation. His ability to excel in both offensive and defensive roles sets him apart. He consistently matches up against the opposition's best players, shutting them down while contributing offensively. Bergeron won the Selke Trophy a record 6 times, underscoring his dominance as the best defensive forward in the game. He even won it in the season that he retired. Like, how incredible is that? He went out still as the best two-way player in the game. It makes us kind of lament that he didn't come back this past season. He probably still had a couple years left in the tank, but he went out on his own terms and can't fault him for that. He was a consistent performer in the playoffs, helping the Bruins reach the Stanley Cup final 3 times during his tenure. Of course, 2019, 2013, 2011, and he played a huge role in that 2011 Cup victory, scoring key goals in Game 7, providing steady leadership throughout the playoffs. And he led by example both on and off the ice. He became captain. His professionalism, work ethic, and commitment to the team unparalleled. If Zdeno Chara hadn't been around, he would have been the captain much longer and closer to Ray Bourque's tenure. And of course, we all remember back in 2013 when he just played through some unreal injuries to help the Bruins stay in that series against the Chicago Blackhawks, which they eventually lost. Now, his legacy would have been cemented with another win in 2019 or 2023. He helped the Bruins. He captained the Bruins to the best regular season in NHL history. Instrumental in those efforts. Kind of banged up near the end there. He's 37, will be retired without question, and he belongs on this Mount Rushmore, in my opinion. So you got Bobby Orr, Ray Bourque, Phil Esposito, and Patrice Bergeron. So hard to narrow it down to 4, and we'll discuss some honorable mentions here as the podcast continues. Who else was in contention to be on the Boston Bruins Mount Rushmore? A bunch of honorable mentions. We'll begin with Eddie Shore, one of the first great defensemen in NHL history. He won the Hart Trophy 4 times, a remarkable achievement for a defenseman. He was instrumental in leading the Bruins to their first 2 Stanley Cup victories in 1929 and 1939. His number 2 is retired. Influence on the game is still recognized today. Milt Schmidt, a key player for the Bruins, both as a player and later as a coach and general manager. His versatility and leadership were vital to the team's success. He won 2 Stanley Cups as a player in 1939, 1941, added 2 more as the Bruins general manager in 1970 and 1972. Oof. You could really make an argument that maybe he belongs up there over Ray Bourque. I'm reconsidering this now, but we'll stick with it. Number 15 is retired, and rightfully so. Johnny Bucyk, one of the most consistent scorers in Bruins history. He won 2 Lady Byng trophies for sportsmanship and gentlemanly conduct, was a member of the 70 and 72 teams, and retired as the Bruins' all-time leading scorer, a record that stood for many years until Ray Bourque, who, I mean, you can't take him off the Mount Rushmore. He didn't win a cup, but he's got games, points records for the Bruins. I mean, how can you take him off? His number 9 was retired as well. My favorite player, Cam Neely, often credited with popularizing the power forward role in the NHL. He had a rare combination of size, strength, scoring ability, scored 50 goals in a season 3 times, including once in fewer than 50 games. He's inducted to the Hall of Fame, and his number 8 was retired as well. Didn't win a cup as a player, unfortunately, but he's been team president for a while with, varying degrees of success. Still one of my favorite, if not my favorite Bruin of all time. Brad Marchand belongs up there as well. He's known for his ability to score clutch goals. He's one of the league's top wingers, a key player for the Bruins, played a critical role in Boston's deep playoff runs, including the 2011 Stanley Cup victory, where he scored some goals in Game 7. Maybe one day he'll be regarded, especially if the Bruins can win another cup, as he continues to serve as captain. But if you're looking at growth and into the future, shaping and maintaining the Bruins' identity, He's vital to those efforts right now, and his legacy still not yet written. Zdeno Chara, how can you not mention him? Physical presence, defensive skills. He was a cornerstone Bruin for over a decade, 2006 to 2020. Served as captain for those 14 seasons. A tenure that was one of the most successful for the Bruins in recent history. He won the Norris in 2009, and he, of course, lifted the Stanley Cup as captain in 2011, the first victory for this team in 39 years. His impact on the Bruins is profound. Number 33 will be retired, and his leadership really paved the way for Bergeron, Marchand, and whoever comes after him in this century. You could put Eddie Shore. Oh, we already mentioned Eddie Shore, Milt Schmidt, Cam Neely. When it comes to goalies, we haven't even mentioned any. Frank Brimsek, you could argue, 1938 to 1949. He was one of the league's top goalies during his time. Won the Calder Trophy, the Vezina Trophy twice, 2 Stanley Cup victories in 1939 and 1941. His number 1 jersey is retired, and can't sleep on Frank. Same with Gerry Cheevers. Known for clutch performances in the playoffs, he backstopped the Bruins to Stanley Cup wins in 70 and 72 with a kind of unorthodox style and his famous stitched mask. Key part of the Bruins' success in the early 70s. He's in the Hall of Fame, and that stitched mask is still a symbol of toughness and resilience around the NHL. Tuukka Rask, he's the franchise leader in wins by a goalie. He won the Vezina in 2014, was a finalist several times. He was a member of the 2011 team. He was starter for the runs in 2013, 2019. Would have won the Conn Smythe if they won in 2019. And he is widely regarded as one of the best goalies of his era. Number 40 is a candidate for future retirement and Hall of Fame as well. And then, of course, we can't not mention Tim Thomas. Very interesting career. Took off later than most, but he made significant impact once he became a Bruins starting goalie. Won the Vezina twice, Conn Smythe, playoff MVP in 2011, set the record for most saves in a single postseason, and was instrumental in that championship win. The Bruins don't win without Tim Thomas in net. His 2011 playoff run is one of the greatest goaltending performances in NHL history. So you can't sleep on Tim Thomas either. Bobby Orr, Phil Esposito, Ray Bourque, Patrice Bergeron are the 4 guys I'm putting on the Mount Rushmore. But you could make a case for Tim Thomas. You could make a case for Eddie Shore or Milt Schmidt because he won cups as a player and a general manager. You could make a case for Johnny Bucyk. So many great Bruins players, but I'm pretty confident in the guys that I picked. You could make a case for Tuukka Rask with the franchise records. It's the same kind of argument made for Ray Bourque. He's got franchise records, never won a cup. Rask has franchise records at his position, never won a cup. Do you put Tim Thomas over Tuukka Rask because he had that cup? He had the cup of Vezinas. Certainly, Ray Bourque deserves a spot because of his longevity and because of his defensive dominance. And he got the Bruins pretty close a couple of times going to the Stanley Cup final. I don't know. Let me know what you think. Do you agree with these decisions? Do you disagree? Should any other players be given honorable mentions? Should any other players be on Mount Rushmore other than the 4 that I mentioned? Hit me up in the comments on YouTube, on social media, at Locked NHL Bruins or at Ian McLaren. We can continue the discussion over there. That's it for today's Tuesday episode of Locked On Boston Bruins. Thank you so much for joining me, friends. Hope you're having a great week. Please do take care of yourselves. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you again here tomorrow on a fresh episode of Locked On Boston Bruins.